Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, aka Nerd Numbers, and with me, as always, is my producer, voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster. You can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Say hey, Brian.
Yeah, what's going on, Dre? We're out last week, but we're into December now. Holiday season. There's so much NBA going on, and yeah, we're gonna get as many shows as we can this month.
Yeah, and we got plenty to talk. You know, we've mentioned this before. As soon as the NBA season is rolling, it is not hard to find a topic. You know, we had a script from last week that we actually were able to add to pretty easily. So just some highlights we're definitely going to hit. LeBron is ageless. The Curryless Warriors. Curry just went down injured right before the show. We're going to talk the amazing Houston. I'm going to get some thoughts in about defense. And we're going to do first, though, I'm going to try something. I may regret this, Brian. We'll see how well this goes. So this is kind of funny. We did a show right before Thanksgiving, and it's actually one of our biggest, our YouTube show normally gets about 100 hits for the video, more for the audio download, which makes sense. We actually got like 600 plus video hits, which is awesome. Thank you very much. Same PSA. If you want to subscribe, if we get to 100 subscribers, lets us do more stuff on YouTube. But yeah, that was awesome. However, the timing was great because it's right before Thanksgiving. I'll throw this out there too. My son's birthday, just turned 1, is also right around Thanksgiving every year, and we had family from out of town. So I was out of it all of last week. I have not really paid attention. So it was a perfect time to actually get more eyeballs on the site and tons of comments. We actually got 25 comments on our show last week, Brian. So apologies. We've probably lost some new people that came and were like, okay, where's the next show? We weren't there last week, Brian. That was all me, recovering from family, first birthday, all that. So, but what I want to do is on last week's show, I'll put that in quotes, we talked about Ben Simmons, the Philadelphia 76ers, and we got a ton of comments. And so what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to try and go through the comment section. I'm going to try and do it effectively, where, I at least give a synopsis, like the little thing in the brain, synopsis of what the comment says and respond. There are 25 of them. I'll try and go quick. Very first one from Mind Omelet noted that Lonzo Ball, because another thing we brought up last week on last week's show is that Lonzo Ball, despite being on pace to be the worst scorer in the history of the NBA, is currently a better rookie than LeBron James was. And we're going to be talking LeBron James, how he might be the most timeless player ever. The upside of Lonzo Ball, even if he doesn't ever get a great shot, is players like Jason Kidd, and I'm just dropping his name, Fat Lever. There would have been no way you would have helped me on that, Brian. But yeah, Fat Lever, these two players.
Well, you had a tweet on that. He went to the Nuggets Nuggets jersey retirement recently,
which is so well deserved. I mean, he's one of these players that you look at his numbers. I mean, he was a point guard that was a triple double machine, which is freaking amazing. Unfortunately, though, he was never a great scorer, and that's always a litmus test. Tracy McGrady made it into the Hall of Fame before Ben Wallace. Tracy McGrady, I think, led the NBA in scoring like 3 seasons. And if you look at like Tracy McGrady's career, true shooting is horrendous, even for the era he played in. So the NBA always gives a damn more about scoring more than anything else. So Fat Lever's a player that's never going to get into the Hall of Fame. That's just never going to happen, especially since he doesn't have the accolades, right? He doesn't have titles or anything. But he's probably one of the greatest Nuggets to ever play the game. So definitely deserved. But yeah, Lonzo Ball could turn into that kind of player even if he never gets a shot. The thing is, his shot is just so damn horrible right now that he really needs to pick it up. A funny note, I saw a headline, Brian, that Lonzo Ball was blaming the Lakers' woes on their rotation. I have like an art rondo.
Was it Lonzo or LeVar? It seemed.
I think it was Lonzo.
Was it Lonzo? Okay, he seems pretty quiet usually. I'm not sure about this.
It was probably LeVar. It might have just said.
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
We'll have to look it up, but I was going to make like a pun. It's like, are you talking the rotations on the ball after you shoot it? Because, yeah, you might want to fix it. But anyway, Mind Omelet brought up that Lonzo Ball already has more career wins produced than D'Angelo Russell. So there is that. He's at least a better pickup than D'Angelo Russell. I think we kind of made this argument. Getting D'Angelo Russell with the number 2 pick, that was a draft they really wanted number 1. They really wanted Ben Simmons, clearly. And then this season was really the year you wanted the number 2 pick instead of the number 1, because Markelle Fultz isn't back yet, but our belief is that Markelle Fultz will not be as good as Lonzo Ball. Anyway, so Chris Ye actually chimed in, which is not surprising. Actually, just agreeing about the Lonzo and D'Angelo point. So, yep. And now, next point from Mind Omelet as well. We'll see how this
This
goes.
is a question to us, so this is good. We're playing here.
Do the Boxscore geeks have an opinion on whether it would be a good thing to automatically credit and assist whichever player passed the ball to the scorer? In other words, there would be no unassisted baskets except if they followed a turnover or rebound. If the NBA Boxscore adopted those rules, would it be harder or easy to judge the value of assists? So this is like the hockey rule. And hockey is a fascinating sport on this because that is how hockey works. Hockey gives assists and a secondary assist and a point for a goal. And what's really fascinating about hockey is they count those all the same. So in hockey, if basketball or hockey, if I pass the ball to you, Brian, and you pass the ball to Patrick, and then Patrick dribbled with the ball and then took a layup, Patrick would be credited with a basket, which would be worth 1 point. You'd be credited with an assist worth 1 point, and I'd be credited with an assist worth 1 point, which I think definitely makes the dynamic of how hockey values players versus the NBA much different. I don't know if that would help or hurt necessarily. I think there is definitely something to the almost footballish nature of passing the ball to a player and them getting a shot off immediately, just because I think in basketball, because there's a shot clock, there's a sense of urgency to being able to take an open shot. And that was the entire point about assists. When Dave Barry first came up with the wins produced regression, he actually left assists out and then examining on regressing on the value of assisted shots versus unassisted shots. Basically, assists are valuable. And then something worth noting is the wins produced formula does actually do team adjusted assist rate. So you get credit for an assist, but it's actually compared to the average of your team. So basically, if your team assists a lot and you have high assists, then you look better. Whereas if your team doesn't have a lot of assists outside of you, basically the idea is you might be stealing some assists from your teammates. So I don't think it would edit things too much. In fact, one of the most surprising things about assists to me in the NBA is how consistent they are season to season. And that's including like biased scorekeepers. So I think the one thing we kind of brought up on last week's show is the notion of how much credit you want to give an assist more to the passer than the receiver or vice versa. And I don't know on that, although Kevin Draper did a really big assist per minute, assist per game, assist per possession, and basically said they all kind of come out in the wash. So I think we've kind of talked a lot about this in modeling things in the NBA where it's kind of like good enough. And candidly, despite the fact that I think assists are one of the more maddening stats because they are subjective based on the scorekeeper, year to year and how they work out, they tend to be one of the more consistent stats and one of the easier to track. And I think one of the more underrated because, assists help the offense. We know this. So when you're looking for players, instead of just looking for players that get lots of points like Tracy McGrady with bad efficiency, looking for good passers like Chris Paul, who we might talk in a second, would be a good thing.
And it's specifically, at least in terms of how wins produced looks at assists, is that an assisted shot, it's going to have a better chance to go in, right? It's like an assist will increase your team's field goal percentage. Is that the idea?
I mean, that's what we see. Basically, if you look at assisted shots in terms of what is credited in the box score versus unassisted shots, assisted shots have a higher percentage of going in. That's just...
And I've seen people say that, like you said, assists are kind of, we're not 100% sure about, and that maybe the sports VU tech might be something to look at for assists.
Well, I actually recall something interesting about the sports VU data when people started looking at it was how rare hockey assists, what I was just talking about, me passing to you passing to Patrick, and then Patrick going in, how rare hockey assists were in basketball.
Oh, interesting.
One that I'm definitely interested in is assists that lead to free throws. Those aren't counted, and it's kind of the same thing. But again, what makes modeling in anything fascinating is how much effort you want to devote to it, and that's what's kind of interesting to me is I think a lot of times in the advanced analytics movement, it's the thought experiments that bug people that get the attention more so than the things that would help. So that's one reason, for instance, the sports VU data to a degree bugs me because we're still down this effing rabbit hole of plus minus variance statistics. BPM my heart breaks. There's actually a fairly nice looking site called NBA Math, verified on Twitter. So I should have followed them, I guess, because we were about the same size at one point. But they're verified. They have a metric called TPA, which I would actually claim is very similar to points over par, but they do it off of BPM. And it's just kind of like there's a metric based off a metric based off a metric, and you've gone so far down this damn rabbit hole of trying to make plus minus something. When there were other interesting stories. And again, I'll throw out his name. I think I've done it, make a hat trick now because I've done it, I think 3 shows in a row. But like Krishna Narsu, there are people that do good analysis with new data that I am intrigued and so in love with. And then what I've seen as kind of a subtweet to other analysts that I've even liked in the past, I've seen so many analysts start with interesting questions when they get into basketball analytics and then wind up looking at plus minus on off. My heart breaks every time I see effing on off data or with someone on, with someone off. I'm going to get a rant in here, Brian. We are 3 comments in.
Before you do the rant, it's officially a subtweet even when you're talking about it on a show, not tweeting. So it's just in talking, it's still a subtweet. I like that.
You're using the nomenclature because the
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. Go ahead with your rant, please.
But okay, so I hate this type of analysis. I have to have talked about this before, where someone says this: with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade on the court, the Cavaliers are plus 20 points, but with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade off the court, they're minus 10. Or sometimes it's more interesting. It's something like with LeBron James and Jay Crowder on the court, the Cavaliers are minus 10, but with them off the court, they're plus 10. People are trying to act as if that combo is an independent variable. And so if anybody has taken an intro level freaking science course, and that for me, I remember in high school biology, we had to do this. When you do an experiment, you're supposed to do a control and a variable. So basically, you're supposed to have, ideally, in an ideal world, you have one group where you don't change anything. You have one group that's almost identical to that one, but you change one thing, and you see the effects of that one thing. And this is, in theory, what regression analysis is attempting to answer. It's attempting to answer the question, all else being equal. The issue becomes that when you are doing the LeBron James on versus LeBron James off, too many other variables change for you to be able to concretely tell me it's LeBron James. Something we know is in the NBA, there are starters. These are people that tend to start the first quarter and the third quarter. When they're on the court, they tend to play with other starters against other starters. When they come off the court, there are different rotations, and the opponent has different rotations, and there are often times in the NBA where rotations match. An example I have for you is back in the day when the Nuggets were actually a playoff-worthy team. They might be this year, and I have comments on that too. Probably not for this show, though. When the Nuggets were a playoff-worthy team, there was a year they were playing the Dallas Mavericks. We had our star point guard, Chauncey Billups. They had their star point guard, Jason Kidd. And I recall when I was watching the series, essentially every time one of those guys went to the scorekeeper, the other went to the scorekeeper. And so the coaches had either the coaches or the players had a very real rotation of, if Jason Kidd is on the court, Chauncey Billups is on the court, and vice versa. So the issue becomes there, right? When you're trying to do on-off, well, Jason Kidd is always facing Chauncey Billups. No one else is facing Chauncey Billups. So now you're answering 2 questions, right? Jason Kidd versus Chauncey Billups versus Jason Kidd's backup versus Chauncey Billups' backup. Not to mention, typically rotations in the NBA are multiple players, right? Even if some of the starters stay in, I think the Warriors typically do this, right? You know better than me. Like who goes off the court first? I think Klay Thompson usually gets a longer leash than the other ones. Usually Curry, Iguodala, or Livingston, one of those 3 tends to be out there, so they don't always play together. The rotation doesn't remain consistent. So when people do this, they're trying to act as if everything stays the same when these players are on the court versus off the court. That is not the case. There's so much stuff. And then when we get into regression, this was the entire point behind adjusted plus minus and regularized plus minus, all these other fucking plus minuses. Got me cussing, Brian. Happy holidays. When you regress on the data, there's just too much noise. You cannot get that. That's one of the biggest parts about statistical sampling and regression analysis is there are times where we just say it is too noisy. We don't know. There's not a big enough sample. One of the classic ones is anytime 2 players match up against each other. I can't tell you if someone had a lockdown defense of Kobe Bryant, if they only play like 2 games against each other, I guess more contemporary. Let's say DeMar DeRozan. I can't tell you if someone shut down DeMar DeRozan or if DeMar DeRozan just had an off shooting night. If they only play each other 2 games and DeMar DeRozan only gets 30 shots off when the two are on the court together. Because, the difference between DeMar DeRozan being great could be 16 to 17 shots going in versus 13 to 14. That's nothing. And so I see too much of this damn stuff where people are trying to answer the question on off with this rotation. How well does the team do without? And I'm sorry. I'm not saying that doesn't matter. I don't want you to come away with that takeaway. I don't want to come away with the takeaway that I'm saying LeBron James plus someone else isn't important to the success of the team. I'm saying measuring that way is not only ineffective, it can sometimes give you the wrong data because it's just too damn noisy. And yet it is still the most popular. And again, this is another subtweet. Analysts that I like and respect, I still see doing this type. And it's so much confirmation bias because it's so easy, right? If you don't like a player, typically their on-off will at least somewhat reflect it because they're part of it, right? LeBron James is a high-usage player. Clearly his team's success is tied to how he does on the court. But that doesn't mean other factors don't affect it, meaning the magnitude we're getting is different. And then there are players, I saw a fun one like Marcus Smart is a horrible shooter, but the Celtics offense is better with him on the court than off the court.
I saw that article and I almost put it on the script, but
guess what? Well, so I got it anyway. Guess what? Like the point I was freaking making, Marcus Smart plays with the starters, which means he's playing with Al Horford and Kyrie Irving. And Tatum is doing really well too. So, he's playing with these other good players. So you're saying the offense is better with him on the court. And this reminds me, this is one of the most popular anecdotes that comes up in the subject, Brian. There was a study, put in quotes, at a company years and years ago. This might be purely anecdotal, but I think it's real. So there's a boss that had the hypothesis that doing a 10-hour workday instead of an 8-hour workday would be more effective for some reason. And he monitored it. So he was on the floor watching it to see if he was right. And he noticed that when they changed the work hours to 10 hours a day instead of 8, they did better. And he said, huzzah, I was right. And you go, you were on the freaking floor, which meant your employees were nervous their boss was looking over their shoulder.
Oh, so like he was watching the 10-hour shifts, but not the 8-hour shifts?
Exactly.
Oh,
so
okay.
I talked about this before when I bashed Kevin Pelton for not knowing what he's talking about. Sorry, Kevin Pelton, not even a subtweet, real tweet. And I was talking about confounding variables because he was doing some on-off statistic stuff. And I was saying there are other variables that can affect when you are saying stuff like this, when you're saying this rotation seems to do better off the court than on the court, meaning whatever, right? It's hurting the team for them to play together, which might be the hypothesis. There's too many confounding variables in NBA data to know that, especially, you can go to Basketball Reference. I don't know if 82 games is still up to date. I know Stats.NBA has this too. You can look at lineup data, and lineup data trails off very, very quickly in minutes you get. And not only does it trail off in minutes, that you have to take into account the opponents they're playing. So it's like you've got a very small number of minutes this lineup played together. It played various different opponents. We brought this point up many, many times on broken record time. So if you've been a fan of the show for years, you have to have heard variants of this in the past. There were definitely different, we acknowledge garbage time is something, right, where teams play a different strategy, or clutch time, right, where it's possible that if your team is up by 4 and Steph Curry's on the court, for a fact he's going to be getting fouled, which means he's going to get lots of free throws and might look better than a team that plays on the flip side of that, which means the players get lots more fouls or they take heaves, they take long shots. So there's too much stuff to be able to just really use it concretely, and I find so many people still do, Brian, and it just drives me crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at NBA Twitter, I see the same thing. Everyone's talking about on-off stats, and I think I saw some tweet, again, from someone pretty smart. I can't remember who it was, so I'm going to accidentally subtweet them, that it's saying, yeah, in 100 minutes, this lineup did that, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that's like 3 games. I mean, what does that even mean? That doesn't mean anything. So, yeah, it's just disappointing that these people know this too. So this is why it's so disappointing. They know it's not statistically significant, but they cherry pick it still because it's accepted. We've
caught Pelton multiple times with him starting with the variant of this is a really small sample, or it's really hard to know yet, but. And that's what makes this so maddening is that it is, I guess obviously we do this, right? Because we
Yeah, so we've been talking about the NBA all the early season so far, right? Most of these early season stats, maybe now it's starting to become better, but it's all kind of like, well, this is kind of how it looks so far, right?
Well, hopefully we've done our due diligence, and you've been very helpful with this of just saying, who knows? We'll see, right? Looks good. Who sees? One of the comments, yeah, we're not going to get through all 25. So this was a fun experiment. Thank you, commenters. I will just about not ignoring them for a week. Obviously, my son doesn't turn 1 every week, thank goodness. But there was actually a commenter in here. If you can remind me who it is, Brian, you can probably find it quicker. Someone actually came in and said, "Hey, could you quit with the freaking modesty already?" I have a pinned tweet on Twitter that says, if Melo does good on offense and the Thunder are good, I'll eat crow. But if Melo is mediocre and if I said, like, if Melo sucks on offense and the Thunder are mediocre, I get to rub it in. And so far, to your point, that is the case. The Thunder have a losing record. Melo is playing the worst he has in his career. I'm actually kind of sad about this. Westbrook is still playing very good. He's just dipped below the star threshold. He might be above it because he had a good game the other night. But he just dipped below the star threshold, which is, I'm going to go with the Brian star, which is 200 wins per 48, which means the average player is about 100 wins per 48. Russell Westbrook's at .172. He's just below the threshold for a Brian star player. He is probably going to end up with 10 wins for the season, which is the Dre star player. But Westbrook is still playing well. He's just not looking as good as he did last season. And by the way, one thing Westbrook was much better at last season than this season is assists. I'll actually steal that as an excuse to get another comment. One of the next comments on our article was from Love Those Knicks, who was actually talking about kind of what we were saying, the idea of partial assists, the idea of looking for passes that lead to open looks, even if the baskets don't go in. That's definitely fascinating stuff. Enes Kanter offensively is looking amazing on the Knicks, whereas Melo and Paul George are looking pretty mediocre on the Thunder. So Westbrook's assists have gone down tremendously this season. Additionally, his shots have gone down and his shooting efficiency has gone down. So it's not a big stretch to say that the offense he is working with this season is worse than the one last season. For all of the people who are fans of the stupid anecdotal things like floor stretch, et cetera, it's not hard to believe that if the offense is worse this season than last season, Westbrook's numbers, rightfully so, look worse in the offense. But I'm happy Westbrook still looks like a good player, but Melo looks horrendous. Paul George, this is another interesting take we had, looks horrendous, especially compared to Victor Oladipo. But they asked, when are you going to, take credit for this? Do you know who said that? I want to give the commenter
Yeah,
credit.
we've got it up. It's Benji Bopper. He's a longtime commenter.
So, yeah. Benji Bopper is like, hey, it's 20 games. You're looking amazing. I'll be candid. I'm still a little trepidatious about taking credit. There's still a lot of season left for us to be proven wrong. But to your point, I think we have tended to wrap ourselves by saying small sample size or don't overreact yet. But the other thing I hate is there's a difference, in my opinion, in using data that measures accurately. We've used this argument about the wins produced stat forever, that is a descriptive stat. It tells you what happened. It is very akin to me saying the Warriors won last night 120-90 or whatever happened. That's what it's doing. It just says, here is what happened. These players were responsible for this event that happened in the past. Thusly, here's how you slice the pie up. And then you can follow it up with saying small sample size, so not guaranteeing that Jordan Bell is going to be the permanent rookie of the year by the end of the season, not guaranteeing that Ben Simmons is going to be the best rookie since Chris Paul. That's what we can say. I hate using a statistic that from the get-go just is never going to be descriptive or big enough for me to use it effectively. And that essentially is what on-off plus-minus boils down to. You are never going to be able to find a plus-minus on-off this lineup combo that sufficiently tells me anything other than this kind of stuff happened. And at the aggregate level, right? On-off plus-minus at the lineup level, at the team level can tell you something, but you are never, ever, ever going to be able to drill it down to the player to mean anything. Sorry.
We just need to increase the number of minutes per game, maybe by like 5 times, so we have more minutes.
And then you can make rule like that. That is one reason baseball is so nice for statistics. I think the annoying thing about baseball versus basketball is, we've said this before, basketball has the most consistent stats. It is the sport that is easiest to moneyball is basketball. And in fact, we should use the San Antonio Spurs as an example, because the San Antonio Spurs did a lot of the same tricks that the Oakland A's did in baseball. But unlike the Oakland A's, the San Antonio Spurs actually came away with like 5 titles and a bunch of 50-win seasons and a bunch of far playoff runs, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas in baseball, no matter how smart you are, that it is just so much noisier and so much more random. But baseball is at least set up in a way that is much easier to check, right? Every player gets one at bat. Every pitcher, a pitcher is going to get 100 pitches a game, barring some major blowup, meaning you're going to get this pitcher giving every batter 2 to 3 looks, meaning you're going to get a very clean, scientific experiment looking set of data that people are happy with. Whereas in basketball, the data is more meaningful, but it's presented to you in a much uglier fashion. And so I found people spend so much more time trying to mess with the data to make it look like what they want, as opposed to just looking at the data and using it to answer a question like, is this player good or not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, most of these comments here for the rest of this thread are about Oklahoma City. And I ended up posting there, and I looked into it a little bit, but so before we get into it, though, I kind of was thinking about, this is like my mini rant here, is I was thinking about 3 different team chemistry scenarios, right? So first is Kevin Durant and the Warriors, when he joined them, a year and a half ago, whatever that was. There was actually people saying in the media, it's going to take a while because of team chemistry. It might not work. They might have too many good shooters and all this. You probably remember that period of time because we were irate and beside ourselves about that. But anyway, obviously that wasn't true. He came in right away. The Warriors were great. They won the title. Here's another team chemistry scenario. This year, Chris Paul goes to the Rockets. Same thing, right? James Harden always has to have the ball in his hand. Chris Paul always has to have the ball in his hand. Plus team chemistry. It's going to take a while to work. It might not ever work. And I think a lot of that also, just as an aside, is people underrate Chris Paul due to his injuries and maybe some other things. Anyway, the Rockets look great. We're going to talk about them in a little bit. They're the best team in the NBA right now. Then we got this third scenario, Carmelo Anthony and Paul George coming to Oklahoma City. Oh, maybe there's going to be chemistry problems. And they're not playing as well as people thought, right? Westbrook's getting blamed. Everyone says, he drags down his teammates. J.G. Brett, he's Jay Gunter Brett now, actually. I think he's got a new account on the comments here. He was talking a lot about the players that left. Oladipo, Sabonis, and Kanter are all playing great. And he's right. Go ahead.
A little credit to 2 of those guys, Sabonis and Oladipo. Sabonis was a rookie last season.
Yeah.
We've noticed this before. Same thing actually happened with Kevin Durant on the Thunder. Looked horrible as a rookie. Next season looks good. LeBron James looked mediocre as a rookie. Next season, a star. Basically, our logic, despite how much we bash bad players, is we kind of give you a pass on rookies. We're like,
Sure.
Who knows what rookie's going to be. Our only logic is it is never a good idea to have a rookie slated for major minutes on your team. And that was like the problem
he
with
was
Sabonis.
really good in college, but too young probably, right? Or who knows, maybe Westbrook is the killer. But the point of all this is, we saw all 3 of these scenarios coming, right? It's not chemistry. It's just that Chris Paul and Kevin Durant are going to go down as 2 of the best NBA players of all time. Carmelo Anthony and Paul George, right now at this age are not that great. Anthony had a couple of okay years, but has never been that good. Paul George had pretty good when he was young, got hurt, hasn't been as good since. We should have seen this coming.
Is easily going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and we just don't think that's right. So that's why these. Do you think that's right? Well, so if you put college and international in, maybe he.
Yeah, I was going to say when we talk Hall of Fame, I think it is important to look at it under that lens, the fame and other accolades, right?
So he did win the title his 1 year at Syracuse, I believe, right?
He won a title at Syracuse. He was awarded some player of the whatever in the tournament, whatever I don't follow college enough to know, but he was like the best player of the Final Four, the best player of the Sweet 16 or whatever.
And he's Mr. Olympics. He goes to everyone. He recruits players for the team and kind of like socially helps hold that team together.
And he's looked good in the Olympics. I mean, we've noticed this before too, right? Like anybody that makes the NBA is one of the greatest basketball players to ever play basketball.
Yes.
Even
Nick Young.
Like, when I joined Google, which is a prestigious software company, Google was like had 10,000 or not 10,000, geez, had 10 times as many people active in the company at the time I joined as the NBA had total in its entire run. So that's just the point, right? Like the NBA, there are only 150 starting jobs, right? There are only 150 jobs for being a starting NBA player ever. Right. And that hasn't grown. Right. There were 28 teams. There went 23 to 28 to 30. I think that was the growth curve from the 70s on. So it hasn't even kept up with like it hasn't kept up with like international players.
Probably true.
It hasn't kept up with the volume. Right. Because, certainly like in the days, we might talk Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in a minute. In the days Kareem was going to school to become a professional player versus now it is so much larger, the number of people that are trying to become NBA players. So it's just like it has not even kept up with the growth of people that want to be NBA players. So it's a very hard one. So Melo as a basketball player is one of the best ever and has done enough, I'll put in quotes, fame-worthy things for me not to have a problem and has played okay. But, as you were saying, he had a couple of good seasons. The biggest freaking red flag to me, which was damned bizarre, is he's going into his 30s. He's been declining the last couple of seasons. The exact same freaking reason I gave for Paul Millsap on the Nuggets. It is never a wise idea to give a big contract to a player that is declining going into their 30s.
Yeah, no, that's right. And now just to finish up on the Thunder and the comments, it is worth pointing out, and Bricks42, another longtime poster, first pointed this out. I missed his post and said it as well. Sorry, Bricks. Anyway, their SRS is pretty good. And by that I mean margin of victory adjusted for schedule. So what I'm trying to say is their record's not very good, but their fundamentals beneath that record are pretty good. They're actually a top 10 team. However, their offense is crap, and they're doing it with defense. So they're, I think, the second or third best defense in the league right now as of December 6th when we're taping this. So I don't know if Anthony and George are playing really good defense. I suspect it's more likely due to Steven Adams, who's having a career season and is really busted out, as well as Robertson is ridiculous on defense. And, Westbrook's not shooting very well. If he improves his shooting, maybe they can get back up, near their expected win total. But they're going to fall short of 53.5, the season projection over-under win total. So, yeah, so I think they're doing okay. They're not doing that bad. I don't want to pile on. But their offseason moves sucked.
I'll give them a little credit, too. What kind of sucked, let me look this up really quick. But at least when I looked it up last, they were an unlucky team. And by that, what I mean is if you look at the SRS, and so this is a metric kept at Basketball Reference, what it is you look at the point margin that they're beating teams by, and you look at the strength of schedule, how good the teams they have been playing is, and then you can use that to ask both how good they are, and then how many expected wins they should have. So according to, let me see, I'm trying to find expected wins. Let me go to season. But they currently have the 6th best SRS in the NBA right now, despite the fact that they have a losing record. And let me see if I can get expected, because Basketball Reference has this as well. Basketball Reference at the bottom. Come on. Yeah, they have the Pythagorean wins and losses. According to Basketball Reference, we would expect the Oklahoma City to be a 14-9 team right now. So while it is true, my tweet that Melo is being weak on offense and the Thunder are struggling, you're right. They're better than they appear. And what I love, this is a subject I wanted to rant about on this week's show as well, is defense. The thing that is keeping the Thunder from sucking is they are amazing at defense. And yeah, right now they are ranked.
They're tied with the Spurs actually in D rating for second.
The Spurs. So who do we got? It's got to be the Celtics.
Yep.
Number 2 right now.
Spurs are second, and Oklahoma City Thunder is tied with them for second / third at 102.4 D rating. Yeah. Portland Trailblazers are third. Houston Rockets are fifth.
Houston, yeah, okay.
Or however you want to say it. You guys know what I'm saying.
1, 2, 2, 4, 5.
Exactly.
You said 3, meant 4.
Yep.
So anyway, what I was, and I'm assuming that the Thunder are slightly worse, and it's just a rounding issue, right? Because they are showing up below the Spurs, and I think they normally show up above them. But the Thunder are really, really good at defense. And Carmelo Anthony, I was familiar with this for years. There's a really stupid political cartoon, or at least in the format of political cartoon, for when Melo was in the Olympics, where Coach Krasinski has written defense on the board, and Melo has turned to his teammates and says, "Man, I didn't know we had to learn a foreign language while we were out here." It has been a running joke that Melo was bad at defense, and yet the Thunder are really good at defense. And I'm not going to lie, I'm not surprised with what you were saying, right? When you listed out Westbrook, Roberson, Melo, George, Cantor, not Cantor, sorry, Adams. Apologies, Steven Adams. Those players, right? One of the advantages you have with Melo and Paul George is you have 2 power forwards that can play small forward. So you now have 2 very mobile, big players on that team. And I'm not shocked that they can play together to play good defense. Defense is one of those things in the NBA that is way more reliant on coaching and teammates than people think. And it just drives me nuts when people are lambasted as being a really bad or really good defender. Another example that keeps coming up this season, and I can't dispute this, is Karl Anthony Towns looks, I've heard lots of people say he looks horrendous on defense. And if you go track down the Timberwolves shot against, like how well the opponents are shooting, they're basically ripping the Timberwolves to shreds at the rim. You'd expect, Karl Anthony Towns as the center is essentially the goalie. You don't know how the rest of that team is interacting with them, because it's entirely possible that Andrew Wiggins is just letting everybody by, and they're flying right at Karl Anthony Towns, and he doesn't have time to react. Who knows? And I mean, this was a point back in the day for the Warriors when they went with Klay Thompson over Kevin Love, and their argument was basically, they've even said this since, we want the 6'8" forward that is really good at switching. That is the key to our defense. Now, admittedly, our thought process, and this by the way, the Thunder are doing this too, is get the wings that can switch good on defense, but get a center. Just get a legit center. Get it. Andrew Bogut was so huge on that team, and if JaVale McGee's knees could last more than 10 minutes a game, he'd be great. By the way, Jordan Bell, he actually got a start tonight. Jordan Bell, if he keeps it up, that could be amazing too. But so I really get bugged when players are lumped as a good or bad defender. Another really common one was Kyrie Irving. When the Kyrie Irving trade for Isaiah Thomas went down, one comment I made is I said, everybody says that Isaiah Thomas is bad at defense, but everybody says Kyrie Irving is bad at defense. So it's essentially a wash. And it turns out that this season the Celtics have the best defense in the NBA, and it's, by a pretty good margin, 1.4 points above the Spurs. Now, again, I think a lot of that has to do with the other players on that team. I think Jason Tatum is a rookie playing great. Marcus Smart has been a notorious one. Al Horford, pretty good as well. I think a lot of it has to do with team. But again, here's another player that for years people have said is a defensive liability. Last season, the Cavaliers sucked at defense, so it wasn't hard to say that. Melo, again, has been on some bad defensive teams. Another player I'm going to bring up is James Harden. James Harden has also been known as a defensive liability. It's one of the most popular memes to show images of people blowing by James Harden, him not trying on defense. Guess what? As you mentioned, the Thunder are 5th in the NBA at defense right now. So I just really, really get bugged at how confident.
Basketball Reference has them tied for second.
For who?
Basketball Reference has the Thunder tied for second in defense with the Spurs.
Yes, but I think they're third with rounding. is my opinion based
Oh,
on
I'm
this.
sorry. I thought you say fifth or sixth or something like
Oh,
that.
Rockets are fifth. I
Oh,
may
okay.
have said Thunder when I meant
Okay.
Rockets.
We're on the same page. Yeah, Rockets are fifth.
Harden are fifth in the NBA at defense, and that's with defensive Steve James Harden. The Thunder with defensive Steve Carmelo Anthony. The Boston Celtics with defensive Steve Kyrie Irving. I'm not saying people are wrong about a player being good or bad at defense, but I am saying it is not as tied to the player as we think. For all of the statistics that are very consistent year to year, that's one reason I just at the top of the show I said assists don't bug me that much. Is you look at the numbers year to year, that's one of the most consistent statistics year to year, and it ties to winning very well. Defense is not as easy to pin down, and yet I find teams are way more confident in investing money in defensive players or investing money in high scorers, and these are two of the more variable and noisy statistics in basketball. So it always amuses me. And it just, again, not much to say other than the abundance of confidence in this player is a good defender, this player is a bad defender, drives me up the walls.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really what NBA Twitter is about, right? Trying to talk about how good and bad exactly every player is, and hot takes all around. I don't have too much more on Oklahoma City. We covered it pretty well. They're better than, other people think they are, but probably not much better than we think they are.
I was going to say, no easy segue, but we got to give a shout out to this. I wrote about it at the start of the season. LeBron James is breaking the age barrier. This is the first guy to have a supersonic jet or whatever metaphor you want to use, right? LeBron James coming into the season had the most mileage on his body for a player his age. The only other player that had been close was Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant had played more NBA regular season and playoff minutes barely than LeBron James at the same age at their respective. And of course, they're both high school players. However, I would argue if you factored in LeBron James's international play, he would probably get the slight nod above Kobe in terms of total minutes played. So, there had not been a player that had put this much wear and tear on their body at this point in their career. A friend of mine actually found an article by Dave Barry right when LeBron James turned 30 that just noted that players tend to get worse after 30, noting the age curve research that is in Stumbling on Wins. And LeBron James has not listened to that. Now, to be fair, and to be clear, there are players that have played well into their 30s. Tim Duncan, Jason Kidd, Steve Nash, John Stockton is the craziest of them all. It's not a hard, fast rule. When we do models and trends, we are just saying be aware. Typically, players in their 30s don't improve and tend to decline. That's what the data says. LeBron James, though, has not hit that wall yet. And in fact, on a permanent basis right now, LeBron James is having the greatest season of his career, which is freaking absurd. A tweet I made about this a week or two ago was, at this point, it's not a question of if LeBron James is the greatest basketball player to ever play. He is. Anybody that puts Michael Jordan above him, let's just be clear, I'm going to be broken record time, Brian. Lots of rehashes of old rants. Michael Jordan gets the nod as the greatest NBA player of all time because of his 6 finals MVPs. He does not deserve all 6 of those finals MVPs. Now, I'm not bashing him. I'm not saying he wasn't a key part of those 6 finals teams. And I'm not saying he didn't earn finals MVPs, but he was playing next to Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, and Dennis Rodman. And I believe each of those players, I think, earned a finals MVP at one point. So I think I've looked at this before. I think Michael Jordan earned 3 finals MVPs, and then I think Horace Grant, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman each earned 1, if you're just looking at the numbers. I know it's going to be considered blasphemy, but the point being, Michael Jordan gets so much credit because he did follow the age curve. Michael Jordan, there's 2 things to consider. Michael Jordan, when he came back after retiring to play baseball, the NBA shortened the three-point line. You could view this in baseball. I know I make a lot of baseball comparisons. It's like introducing the designated hitter rule, but only doing it for 2 seasons and then taking it away. So Michael Jordan benefited from a shortened three-point line. He was good from 3 for the only time in his career during these 2 seasons. And then he benefited greatly from basically Dennis Rodman being gifted to the Bulls and helping that squad win 3 more titles, which is just ridiculous. If Michael Jordan had won those first three finals, the first three-peat, come back, been on a competitive squad, maybe won one or two more titles, he wouldn't even be considered greater than Magic Johnson or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Wilt Chamberlain, depending on how his final scoring total ended up. He just happened to end up in the right situation where he won a bunch of titles. So whenever people bring up Michael Jordan as the best player ever, let's just be honest. It's because of finals, total finals wins, and finals MVPs. And so much of that is team-based, right? LeBron James, if you start listing out the great players that Michael Jordan got to play next to, Horace Grant, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, those three, freaking amazing, should be first ballot Hall of Famers, the like of them. Two of them weren't, which is freaking stupid. Then you had Tony Kukoc, Steve Kerr with a shortened three-point line, some other good ones that I'm forgetting that were also good. Michael Jordan's teammates were significantly better than LeBron James's have ever been. And in spite of that, LeBron James has 3 titles and how many back-to-back finals? Is he going for 8 this season?
Yeah, something like that. Well, here's one thing I'll say on Jordan, though. Why did he get singled out of all those guys to be the best player in the Bulls? Well, I think it's because of just yay points, right? He was the scorer, and he's a very good scorer, but... And I'll add one more thing to that is he was the first big media marketing guy, right? Like he was all over TV. You want to be like Mike. I think the NBA told us he was the best player. Therefore, we believed he was the best player.
He hit the NBA right during expansion. Like that's the key is Dr. J was Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan, but he played in an era in the ABA had no coverage, basically nothing. Michael Jordan hit the NBA right as David Stern expanded it internationally, right as he expanded their television contracts. Michael Jordan hit it as a perfect time. Kobe Bryant's very similar, right? Kobe Bryant also benefited from the international wave being in Los Angeles. So it's just kind of arbitrary. But anyway, LeBron James running up the score, freaking amazing player at this point. And that's all I really had to say. It's ridiculous to me. I don't know if he's still there, but a few days ago, now, admittedly, there are some players that are playing better per minute this season than LeBron James. But LeBron James is still, and I think after tonight, he almost had another triple-double tonight. He is currently the league leader in wins produced at 6.4 in 888 minutes. He keeps this up for the rest of the season. He'll put up another 20-win season, which I'm going to try and take a quick look and do some back-of-the-napkin math real quick about that. And by back-of-the-napkin math, I mean just count up the number of 20-win seasons this guy has. It's ridiculous that he's playing this well at this age. And, a steady decline in LeBron James would be impressive, but him playing this good is just ridiculous.
So here's what's so ridiculous about it. I've got his, player card up on Boxscore Geeks right now. And so first of all, like you said, he's played a ton of seasons already. And looking at his rookie year, he wasn't that great. Kevin Durant, a lot of other rookies aren't that great. Fine. After that, from, let's say, 04, 05 to, 06, 07, 08 maybe, he becomes a star, or like, wow, LeBron looks great. Great young player. Then by his last few years in Cleveland, I think he's made a couple of finals here, I think, with these crappy players you were talking about. He's looking like an all-time great. He's putting up amazing stats there in Cleveland. Goes to Miami, basically keeps it up, right? Continues putting up, 6, 7 points over par per 48. Just all-time great numbers. Wins a bunch of titles. Comes back to Cleveland, and he hasn't been as good the first 3 years in his Cleveland return, let's say. Still a star, still really good, but not quite all-time great level LeBron. Like maybe the age curve is finally catching up to him. But then this season, all of a sudden, he's got it back. He's got back that, younger LeBron.
It's his best minutes ever.
Yeah.
He's playing the best per minute he has ever played in his career.
It's like he was following the age curve, and then he broke it. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be interesting. I have lots of opinions, and I don't know if we have a lot of time to discuss, like, steroid use and stuff.
I mean, he's smart if he's doing it because we got to see a great player.
Well, also, it'll be interesting because there's no guarantee that he isn't doing something to help alleviate age with better treatment or whatever. And sports are arbitrary, right? In baseball, you are allowed to basically take the ligament of a dead person and put it in your arm to get a better arm, and that is allowed. That's cool.
It's Tommy John elbow surgery.
That's what it's called. But you are not allowed to take like growth hormones to bulk up muscle, or certain ones, right? Because I think Mark McGuire during the steroid scandal tried to claim he was using one that was allowed, even though whatever.
An important point about that metaphor is players that come back after Tommy John elbow surgery are often not the same or worse than they were before. Sometimes they're better, like they have better velocity with that cadaver.
I mean, there's other. I've heard. I think there's John Sally, a Piston and famous commenter since, has made the point like, is LASIK allowed? Because you're taking your eyes, which are bad, and making them better. And this is, and you would be a liar to not say that vision is important in sports. So you're allowed to do LASIK, right? And in other times, right, there's a question of if I get injured and I use steroids to basically alleviate healing, is that okay? So there's all sorts of moral conundrums that obviously at this point it's just speculation. But I guess my point is, even if people want to try and bring that up, I'm going to just kind of shrug my shoulders and say, it's not cut and dried. It's just remarkable to see LeBron James doing this, no matter how he's doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen freak athletes in pro sports. Well, I mean, I guess everyone in pro sports is by definition, but even on top of that, we've kind of seen them in all eras, even back in the old days before you'd think steroids would be available. So I'd say it's possible, but who knows?
Yeah, and I mean, well, people also have a very rose-tinted vision of sports about purely, I bring up baseball. Baseball, they used to basically allow amphetamines in the locker room. There'd be like candy dishes with them for you to eat.
Ball 4 by Jim Bouton. There's the book where they talk about that famously.
Definitely talk that. And I mean, who freaking knows in other sports the stuff that's been going on. So it's just very naive to think that sports were ever pure. There are lots of things like this.
Is this a good segue to Kareem and UCLA?
Oh my God,
Let's talk about that now.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I'm going to try and recap this as quickly as possible. It's gotten even crazier because we put this on the script 2 weeks ago, as we noted. So the Ball family, LiAngelo and LaMelo Ball. Which one did he? It's LiAngelo, right? LeVar Ball is pulling LiAngelo Ball from UCLA. Because he was arrested for stealing sunglasses in China. So that all happened. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar talked about it a little and said that this.
He talked about it before he got pulled out of school, I believe. He just talked about the stealing incident.
It was stealing of the car and that he was driving a Ferrari. He said he has put a stain on his legacy at UCLA because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, we were looking this up pre-show, played 3 seasons of varsity under Wooden at UCLA, won 3 titles, won the best player in the Final Four 3 seasons. I think outstanding player in the Final Four 3 seasons in a row. So he is the greatest. What are they? The UCLA Bears?
The Bruins. They're the baby Bears.
Okay, whatever. Is that what a Bruin is?
Something like that. Yeah, smaller bear. That's what we like to say because we're paternalistic up here.
All right, and because you're what?
We're the Golden Bears.
It's okay. All right, so. All you need to know about California colleges.
We love bears. We also love them in San Francisco in the Castro district. There's a big bear fest every year there, for those who know what that is.
All right.
That's the other kind of bear we like in California.
Ryan, I'm going to assign you this. You do have to title the show. This one has to be something about bears. Anyway, so Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is saying that LiAngelo Ball has stained his legacy, and then also notes that he wishes he wouldn't flaunt like the Ferrari, that there would be some integrity to the school. And this is so maddening because college sports has been corrupt forever, and even now, right? I don't know what the UCLA coach is making, but they are making a ludicrous amount of money to coach basketball. So this idea that any player, and I find so many players do, this idea that college sports is somehow pure or about whatever. And then you brought up the best one. So who is Jason Belzer?
Oh, he's a journalist of some kind. I don't remember. He's a sports attorney according to his Twitter account. Let's bring it up here.
Beautiful. So you should follow Jason Belzer on Twitter. I was not apparently, but he quoted the NCAA president Mark Emmert on the VAR ball. Is this a part of someone being part of a university as a student athlete, or is it about using college athletics to prepare yourself to be a pro? If it's the latter, then you shouldn't be here in the first place. What the fuck? I'm going to curse. What the fuck? Like, it's such a farce for anybody not to think that the one and done players in college sports are not just there as a skipping stone to the NBA. And in fact, remember, Ben Simmons was criticized because he picked LSU as a school, despite the fact LSU is a good school, right? I don't know what it's ranked in the country for academics or whatever. But he picked LSU for familial ties and whatever. People were bashing him because he basically picked a bad school for competing in the NCAA Final Four, March Madness, Sweet 16, whatever. March Madness. What's the 64 version of it called? Anyway. So I know it's March Madness, but is there something for the
first round? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. Because there's Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four. I'm trying to think. There's got to be something.
64 and 32 they don't care about as much. That's just pedestrian. You don't get to be special until you win 2 rounds.
Yeah. Okay. So, but people were criticizing Ben Simmons like he's not playing for a team that's going to compete with the knowledge that impacts your draft stock. So like they weren't even concerned. They weren't like, why did he go to a good school that he might like? They were like, why didn't he go to a school that was going to compete and help his draft stock? So it's such a freaking farce. And then you had, I'll leave it up to you how much behind the scenes stuff, but you had some insight on UCLA and Kareem about the storied history of the Bruins.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just, I know someone who was his classmate there, just an acquaintance of him, didn't really know him that well, who said that it was everyone, all the students, everyone there knew at the time, and I think this has been widely reported. I'm not breaking news here or anything, that UCLA under John Wooden had a big-time slush fund for the players, and that was how it was done back then. And I think it was, it's been done in a lot of schools. So I don't know, maybe Kareem himself didn't receive that slush fund, and maybe he didn't even know about it. Maybe he was hidden from it somehow. Maybe he knew about it but disapproved of it. I don't know enough about the situation to speculate on his motives or anything, but it seems hypocritical without having that extra context that he was at UCLA, a program with a slush fund, and now he's criticizing players for it now. I mean, he is, so I think this has to do with his background. I mean, he is, I don't know exactly what his title is, but I know he's some kind of, official holy man. So, he's a religious guy. He probably doesn't like flashy cars. That's probably a big part of it, but it still looks weird.
I'm going to put him in the same category. This is going to pain me because I do like Kareem a lot of times. It's funny because we were talking about this, like Kareem is right on a lot of issues and then some he's wrong. And we were kind of saying this is everybody. I was telling you pre-show, sure. I kind of hate this trope that's become very popular in media of the like super genius, what Rick on Rick and Morty is actually satirizing this genius that is good at everything, that can do everything. That is bullshit. It is really, really hard. Man, I'm cussing a lot in this show, Brian. It is really, really hard to be good at stuff.
That's what you're a genius at, Dre, cursing. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. And so, but what I'll also say to that is that it also gets even rougher when you've got conflicts of interest. So obviously Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, being such a storied collegiate athlete, makes it hard for him to kind of separate himself from that and look from the outside. We find this in a lot of areas. Sports is a great one for it, where if you're in the weeds, a lot of stuff seems normal, right? It seems normal if somebody disrespects you in baseball to throw a ball 90 miles an hour at their head. There are times where that seems normal, and you will have people that tell you that makes sense. And if you take a step back, if you take 10,000 foot view and go, is there ever a case where you're rude to someone and the correct response is to threaten their lives by throwing something really, really hard at them? The answer is no. So sports gets into this weird category. And yeah, I've seen so many players that seem smart, like Mike and Mike, I think Golick on
Yep.
Mike and Mike showing us back.
He's now with Trey Wingo after the ESPN shakeup.
I have not watched in forever, but he was very much the same way, where he just had this really big blind spot to collegiate sports about the purity and sanctity and whatever of collegiate sports. So I think that's really, really hard, and we noticed that. So Kareem, I'm putting him like in the same Charles Barkley category, where it's like, a weird forgetfulness if he's saying all this. Because, for instance, one thing he did later in his career was like he was in the movie Beverly Hills Troop. What's the lady from Cheers? She starred in it.
I don't remember this one. I'll have to catch this.
Look it up. It had a bunch of people. It had the mother from Spy Kids. It had the lead singer of Rilo Kiley, Shelley Duvall, I think, from Cheers and The Shining. Had a bunch of famous. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar shows up in it, in his mansion buying Girl Scout cookies. So it's like, it's really weird for players to say that they're ruining the legacy of my school by showing money when you're pointing out there was money being thrown around to the players back in the day. He's ruining my legacy by acting flashy. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has acted flashy in the past. I'm certainly fine with him saying this kid acted immaturely and I don't approve of that, meaning the stealing the sunglasses. But again, there is nobody in their mind that can say that there are not college people of all walks of life, athletic or no, that do stupid things in college sometimes that get them arrested. In fact, I think the Bush family, right? I think who freaking knows what George W. got into trouble. I know there are stories about college. So it's like, it's an interesting forgetfulness about things. And that always kind of bugs me. So I'm not saying Kareem is wrong on LiAngelo, and the Ball family is interesting and we'll have to keep watching them. But it is kind of maddening to watch almost as you're kind of pointing out, the weird blindness to his own legacy.
Yeah, and I won't add anything more into that, but just some context for the Mark Emmert stuff, who's president of the NCAA, by the way. So basically what LeVar Ball, the father, said was, well, LiAngelo's suspended now, and indefinitely, I think. So he could have missed, the whole season for that matter. And he's like, well, he's just going to go one season anyway, so why not just have him drop out? Like, this whole thing's just a farce, right? And
makes sense.
Of course he's right, and you mentioned Ben Simmons earlier, who went to LSU, and as you pointed out a couple weeks ago, he said somewhat recently, I didn't learn anything at LSU. That was pointless, basically, that I had to spend a year there. So then Mark Emmert comes out and says, well, let's see, don't be part of this. Don't muck around the system. The one and done culture. Anyway, a few things about that, right? One and dones. It's like, well, the point is they're forced to do it. So Mark Emmert says it's stupid. Everyone says it's stupid. Why are they still doing it? And we know the answer, right? Because they're getting free labor. So, it's like, it's just really funny that he said that when everyone agrees with him, really.
It's a weird, I've been getting like a political teaser at the end every week. It does remind me a lot of just like the Republican Party right now in politics, where it's just like, you can just say stuff that is clearly a lie, and there's nothing like that. It's very defeating when people say things. A lot of the people saying things like McConnell saying stuff about the new tax plan, and it's just a lie. And you look and you're like, this is everyone knows this is, it's untrue. Everybody knows this is untrue. No one likes this. The same is true of NCAA, and I guess it's an effective strategy to just beat people down where you just ignore it forever, because this has been going on for years with the NCAA. Big names have come out swinging, and it was a big. I need to look up to see if it went the next step. How am I dropping his name?
You're talking about the O'Bannon brothers lawsuit.
Ed
and Charles O'Bannon.
O'Bannon lawsuit.
And it was class action. I think there was hundreds of people involved in that.
But I don't think it went well or went anywhere. So it's just kind of like they haven't won, and just the NCAA repeats the same student athlete myth over and over and over again, and it just beats you down eventually, where like even seeing this, I'm like, who knows? But it is possible if football loses popularity and any overseas league gets anything, here's the rough part. The G League or the League could easily be the death knell of the NCAA basketball program if the NBA had the stones to do it. But we know perfectly well from watching things that the NBA has a very clear working relationship with the NCAA. So despite this freaking quote, don't do this if you're going to do this, the NBA I keep saying NBAA, Brian. Maybe that'll be a title too. But the NBA keeps instituting rules and trying to institute rules that basically say you have to go to college if you want to play in the NBA.
The National Basketball Athletic Association. I know what you're talking about.
Love it. All right. We've actually gone significantly over an hour at this point, Brian. I think we hit all the top. We didn't give Houston as much time as I'd want, but you definitely did get your line in about it. Did you have any more rants or comments to say? If so, I say go for it, and then we'll head out.
No, not too much left. It's worth noting, like you said, Steph Curry is hurt. He's going to be out at least 5 games, maybe more. The Warriors, again, are another one of these unlucky Pythagorean teams, so I'm not too worried about them. They should be winning more than they are. And Kevin Durant is playing pretty bad this season, and that's been one of their biggest problems. He's just been turning it over a lot, so we'll see how it goes with them. Memphis fired their coach Fizdale a few weeks ago, a week and a half maybe. Apparently he hadn't spoken with Marc Gasol, their so-called star player, in 10 months, and that relationship was a big part of the reason. Well, Gasol and Conley, they're getting up there. They're kind of been dinged up and injured. I don't think those guys are guys you can build around anymore, so it's hard to blame Fizdale for Memphis.
Yeah. I mean, what was fascinating, we've enjoyed this. The Memphis Grizzlies have overperformed a couple seasons in a row now. They've been like the new age Spurs, where
whoever their trainer is, hire that guy.
We've had a couple seasons in a row where we said they're so injured and so old, there is no way this team can compete, and then the team still wins in the 40s and goes to the playoffs. So what's funny to me is this team basically, if you're being honest, and we've talked a lot about this, about how one of the biggest problems in NBA management is unrealistic expectations, not realizing how good your team is versus how good they actually perform. There can, like you were pointing out, OKC is funny because to us, I actually, like you're noting, I was a little trepidatious about coming out swinging as hard with an article, though I did plenty of tweets about my preseason take, because their SRS is actually doing quite well and their defense is doing better than I would have expected. To us, OKC is overperforming what we'd have expected. Obviously, Russell Westbrook's underperforming, with the rest of the team kind of averaged out. So it's like OKC is overperforming to us, but I finally picked up NBA 2K18 and I was playing it, and OKC is ranked like 3rd based on value. So, although I don't give NBA 2K much credit, the season the Warriors got the all-time record for wins in a regular season, they were ranked 10th to start the year. So whatever, NBA 2K.
Oh, that Durant chemistry clearly was bad.
And for what we're talking about with Durant doing crappy, we pick our spots, Brian, because tonight he got a triple-double, shooting. Wasn't actually amazing shooting for Durant, but pretty good shooting. 13 for 28, 6 for 6 from the line with 11 rebounds, 10 assists, and only 3 turnovers and 2 blocks. So he had a really good game. Of course, right after we're saying he's not playing up to snuff, and it's Curry's team. But so anyway, it's all about expectations. The Grizzlies have overperformed like 3 seasons in a row, and then they're finally starting to come back down to earth, in large part due to age. And who gets the boot? Fizdale. Where it's like really like this front office, you're kind of going, this team has been held together by duct tape and glue, and it's finally starting to fall apart, and you're going to blame the coach. However, admittedly or allegedly, Marc Gasol was having problems with Fizdale. Who knows on that? But then, of course, we're probably going to go with the route. I think Marc Gasol's having an up season. He's kind of weird, but he's still old and has been declining, so it's kind of an interesting.
Matt Moore on CBS had a good quote on it. The optics of the situation are inescapable. A 32-year-old aging center on a max contract clashed with his coach, and after it reached Sunday's boiling point, the team sided with its all-star. So that pretty much explains it.
There's nothing surprising there, but I mean, essentially what's happening is Fizdale is getting the blame for this team sucking. And then, what's funny, and I'm okay going to overtime on this subject.
Sure.
Like, this is the team that drafted Thabit, one of the worst, has to be the worst number 3 draft pick of all time, right, at this point. Right in front of James Harden, I believe. I believe they traded, didn't they trade away the rights to Kevin Love, if I'm not mistaken?
Which team is this now? I'm getting Memphis? Oh, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure.
Yeah. let's take a quick look. I'll see. It'll take just 2 seconds. I'm going to look up Kevin Love at Basketball Reference, and then they have all of his transactions at the bottom.
I know the player that got picked in the spot that they traded Love for didn't do very well.
Drafted number 5 in the 2008 NBA draft, and he was traded, for Greg Buckner, Mario Yarrick. The big one was O.J. Mayo and Antoine
That's
Walker.
right. It was O.J. Mayo. That's right.
So this team drafted Love. This team picked Thabit in front of James Harden and I believe Steph Curry. So this team has made a lot of, they have not drafted well in years. We thought that Zach Randolph as a signing was freaking terrible. Obviously, the Gasol trade was ridiculous. So this team has basically made a bunch of bad moves, somehow still managed to be a playoff-worthy team that is now mad at their coach that they're regressing to average. So,
and something I was looking earlier is that so Conley, has been pretty good, very underrated player, but on a big contract, old and hurt now. Gasol kind of the same situation, although I think he's actually playing. Their other players are actually playing okay. Green, Evans, Parsons, Ennis, all look pretty good.
Last season, I think we really liked JaMychal Green, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he looks good. He is, I believe, a nephew of Horace Grant. I think he's Harvey Grant's son. There's so many Grants. They're like the Plumleys. I get confused, but good lineage there.
But I mean, yeah, it's just kind of is what it is. We tend to, our kind of opinion is this is something that doesn't strictly matter. We say most coaches are interchangeable. There are coaches that matter, but they're rare. So it's like, we'll get upset. Like if Popovich got fired or whatever, we'd get upset. But they tend to be rare. But it's just funny that coach firings often are just kind of a pomp and circumstance for a random event that is just signifying that someone is unhappy on the team. And it's like, it's just a bizarre part of, it's a bizarre ritual in a sport to basically say, let's pay this person. It feels like a sci-fi story, Brian. So like The Harvest or whatever, like these stories where it's like someone gets made king for a day or whatever, and they're, they have a day to do whatever they want, or they're paraded around or treated. They get feasts, women, all this stuff. And at the end of the day, they kill them because it's just like a ritual. I mean, essentially, that's what coaches are in the NBA. I'm going to have to find this. I'm going to have to email
harsh.
Fisher because he's going to know the trope that I'm talking about. That is a story trope in sci-fi. The ritualistic sacrifice where you treat them, you fatten them up like a pig and then kill them essentially for good luck. That's what NBA coaches are.
Here's one thing I'll say though. Even if whether Fizdale is the coach or not doesn't matter as much as the players, it doesn't necessarily mean it was the wrong choice to fire him. He might actually be a bad coach, and he might be a bad fit with the players. So firing him might have been the right choice. I don't really know enough to say that. It's just that it's not really going to affect the team.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just all that's worth noting is this team keeps firing coaches, and the real systemic issue is they are not very good at picking players. They've lucked into some players that have overperformed. Marc Gasol for Pau Gasol, and it's still worth noting that Pau Gasol has still vastly outperformed Marc Gasol. And that's what's nuts is even comparing their like time. Like if you do the stopwatch when Marc Gasol starts and Pau Gasol from then on, I believe Pau Gasol's had more wins and better seasons and all that. I think there might be a few seasons where Marc Gasol wins, but I think overall Pau Gasol's the player you'd rather have. Zach Randolph way overperformed. Mike Conley came back from a huge injury. It's, this team has overperformed, and yet they're going to keep firing coaches. And Bickerstaff, I'm willing to bet he's not going to last.
There you go. Yeah, no, that's all I got on Memphis. I think, not too much surprise going on there.
All right, well, that has been our show. If you found us not through the website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. We are on iTunes and Stitcher as The Boxscore Geeks Show. Subscribe and upvote. It helps us out. We go live every week, usually Tuesday or Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, twitch.tv/nerdnumbers. I've been your host, Ray Alvarez. You can find me on Twitter as nerdnumbers. Co-host, producer, voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster. You can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. If you want to catch the recaps of the show, you can find us on YouTube channel Nerd Numbers. If you want to subscribe to that, if we get to 100, it just helps us out. I'm not going to plug that too much harder, but we're so close. We're like 10 people away, I think. Anyway, that's been our show, and we'll see you next time.